Yo, what is good, MMA gang? We are back to discuss another badass fight night from the UFC. And we got Jack Della, the former champion, taking on Carlos Prates. So this is for sure one of the better fight nights we've gotten this year, one of the better cards stacked from top to bottom with decent names. We've been getting a few lackluster cards the last few weeks, kind of been putting us to sleep. But, the UFC is finally kicking it up into better gear. Paramount is finally putting in some better work. They're taking the criticism. And we should be in for some, better fights coming this summer. So, yeah, let's just get into the card, break it down, discuss it a little bit. This is basically going to be my first video, I believe, if I get around to putting it out. I tried to record one for the Aljo fight night last week. Shout out to Aljo on getting that dub. That was, shout out to him and Zala. It was a hell of a fight. But I never got around to editing it, so I didn't post it. But hopefully this one, we get around to posting. So yeah, this one's taking place in Australia, Perth. So they for sure got the Aussies, the Kiwis popping out for this one, and they gave us a decent card. So from the bottom to the top, we got some decent names. But yeah, the starting fight: Cody Steele versus Dom Farfan. I'm not gonna lie, this is my first time even really taking a look at the full card, and I'm not too sure about Dom. I'm assuming, this has to be his. Oh, okay, this is his second fight in the UFC. He actually fought on the Volk and Lopez card and got the dub. And he was on the Road to UFC series, so he's barely making his name known to most of us. Cody Steele, I for sure have seen a few of his fights. He's coming off the loss to Rong Zhu, and this is also his second fight in the UFC. In line with this one, it's 50-50 toss-up. Don't know them too well, so I'm gonna just lean Cody Steele. I know I remember his fight with Rong Zhu being a little bit of a scrap, so yeah, I'll just lean bro in that one. Then the next fight we have Jonathan Mikhailov and Temba Grimbo. So I know a lot of people like being on the Grimbo hate train. I don't even know where it all stemmed from, but, y'all do y'all. For me, the guy never rubbed me wrong. He is coming off the finish against Luque, I believe. Oh, okay, then he fought Jeremiah Wells afterwards. So he's coming off 2 losses. So, he's really not trying to go on a 3-fight loss streak. That's when you're starting to get towards cutting territory from the UFC. The Luque fight was short notice, so I don't think they'd cut him unless, he just has an Aster class. But, he's on the verge of it. And then Mikhailov, he got that sub in his last fight against Oban Elliott. That put me on to bro. I remember his Kevin Jousset fight. That was a good win. I was a little bit riding the Elliott hype train at that point, so I thought Oban would get it done. But, yeah, Mikhailov with the, the rear naked choke. So, yeah, he's for sure, he's promising right now. He can have some places he can go. So I think I got to lean Mikhailov. He seems like his grappling's really good. His striking is, pretty technical. Temba, he has been chinned a few times. He's been subbed by Luque. So, yeah, hopefully it's a good scrap. But, yeah, I think I got to lean Mikhailov. Then after that, Wes Schultz and Ben Johnston. So I'm not even too familiar with either of these guys. This is, okay. Wes Schultz was the one who fought Damian Pinas. Shout out to bro. And just got obliterated by bro. And this is about to be his second fight. He did get a sub on Contender Series. And then let's check out Johnston. He's 5-1, so not too much experience. Looks like his debut was all the way back in 2010. He took a little break and came back. And he was able to put together a finishing 4-5 finishing streak outside the UFC. So that's nice. Looks like we should be in for a decent scrap. On this one, I might take bro. Okay, he trains at a City Kickboxing with all the guys. I feel like their gym is really good at taking kickboxers and just turning them into MMA fighters and really circling in on that takedown defense. On this one, I think I'll lean Johnston. It's his first fight. He is on a finishing streak outside the UFC, so I think I'm going to lean bro a little bit in that one. The next one, Kobe Thignesi against Vince Morales. With Thignesi, I know he fought Alexandre Topuria and took the L, and then he came back with a bounce-back win after that. I slightly remember that fight. I feel like he was dominating, but then there were times wherever he was getting rocked, I want to say he was getting rocked by Bro. So, maybe his striking defense isn't the best. But he trains with Volkanovski, so, obviously he's getting in good rounds in the gym. He's getting better. And then as far as Vince Morales, I feel like he hasn't impressed me too much in the UFC so far. Yeah, he's on a 3-fight loss streak. Kind of seems like they're just trying to feed him prospects to build their name. Rojas, Elijah Smith. He lost the decision of Taylor Lapilus. Yeah, I feel like Thignesi might have this one. Overall, they're probably trying to build Bro up a little bit, so I got to lean Thignesi on this one. And we got Jacob Malkoun and Gerald Meerschaert. We all know GM3. He's an OG, been in the game for a long time. Has got him fucked up a few times, but that ground game, that jiu-jitsu, the submissions are goated from Bro. And Malkoun, he upset Finney in his last fight. That was a pretty weird one. Finney, he's not the best, but we all love him. He interacts with the fans on social media, so shout out to Bro. He TKO'd Petrosky. I think that was the one where Petrosky headbutted his hip and knocked himself out. That shit was crazy. He seems decent. He's lost to only Brendan Allen, Phil Hawes. Those aren't even names to scoff at. I feel like those are decent if you're trying to come up in the middleweight division. So he's only 30 years old. It's just tough. I wonder how good his submission defense is. But Meerschaert, let me just get a refresher on his last fight. Oh, man, he is on a bad losing streak. Shit. RDR, then Brad Tavares, Olin Jacek, and Kyle Dawkins. I mean, honestly, most of those names are, either people who have been around the UFC veterans for a minute or, very skilled guys. So nothing to scoff, to scoff at. He's 12-13 in the UFC, so, now he just passed the point where he has more losses than dubs, which isn't good. He's 38 now. I think I got to go Malkoun. I could see GM3 pulling off, a crafty sub, but it seems like Malkoun is, younger and on the way up. And then after that, we have Kevin Christian and Junior Tafa. Man, this is a tough one because I know Kevin Christian lost in his last fight. It was his debut against Billy Alakana. And, Billy seems to be pretty good, honestly. I've really enjoyed his recent performances, so I think he's on the up and up at that weight class. He's coming off he had a win on the Contender Series, and this is about to be his second fight. Yeah, I'm not too sure on Bro's game at the moment. And then Junior Tafa, we all know the Tafa brothers come to bang for sure. Just straight throw hands, but if you take them down, that is where they are most likely going to get finished at. He got finished by Billy as well, so both of these are just Billy's sons battling out for who's the older son. Tuco Tokos choked him out. So, if you take him down, Walter Walker got him with his heel hook on the run he's on. So, it seems like, if you take them down, you're most likely going to secure a dub. Christian does seem to have decent ground game. I could see him getting slept. A Tafa Brothers fight, I feel like you never really want to bet on them. But then again, Junior is at light heavyweight now. So I think he's taking it more serious. He's in better shape. Oh, man, he knows he could be on the edge of getting cut. I might lean Junior. I feel like his striking looked decent against Alakana, but once that ground game and a wrestling threat came in, he wasn't able to sit down on his punches as much. But I think maybe this one, if he's able to just lock in off the bat and really bring some damage to Christian, he can get it done. And then the last prelim is Cam Rouston versus Robert Brecki. Not sure exactly how to say that. Bro's from Poland, so they got the interesting pronunciation. He's coming off the Brad Tavares win. He lost to Ihor Poteria. Not the best look. He's pulled out of a decent amount of fights, right? Them canceled, so there's that. And then Cam Ralston, I'm pretty sure, also trains with the City Kickboxing Boys. Yep. Has that good striking base. I think I'm going to lean Ralston in this one for sure. I feel like he's looked pretty decent in his recent fights. And, he seems to be a prospect the UFC are pushing up. So I'm going to lean Ralston. And we got Tuivasa going against Louis Sutherland, stepping up on short notice, man. Louis Sutherland is coming off of the loss to Brando Pericic, where even though he got finished, like I expected him to just stand there like a bowling ball and just get knocked over by Brando's big ass. He's such a big boy and really can sit down on his punches and starts throwing them, and then he got heel hooked by Walker before that. So he's on a little bit of a loss streak. He knows one more he might get cut, but he's stepping up on short notice, doing the UFC a favor. So I feel like they wouldn't cut him, but I know it's stupid to bet on Tuivasa in the big 2026. He's on a 6-fight losing streak at this point. But I think I'm gonna lean with bro on this one. I mean, they brought in Sutherland on short notice. He's barely gotten the train for this one. I feel like they want to throw Ty a layup. So I feel like all the fans want to see him get a dub. You can't not like Bam Bam. He's just a cool guy. So I'm going to go with Tuivasa just blitzing him round one and getting a knockout to start out the main card. And then we got a banger right after that. Shamil, the Meal Deal, the Blob, the Tank himself, Gaziev, going against Brando Pericic, coming out of City Kickboxing. Man, this one is tough. Brando, he's for sure has the athleticism, the speed, the raw power, I think. But Shamil, his striking can be a little underrated. The way his build is doesn't strike fear into his opponents or anybody just looking at him. But yeah, I feel like his striking is pretty decent. 9 of his wins by KO. He's coming off the loss to Waldo Cortez, and Cortez, he's the real deal. He's top 5 in this division, so no shame in that loss. Shamil's probably in that top 10 range. I think top 8, top 5. He can crack the top 5, but just matters who's in and out the division. There's a lot of names the UFC's pushing in that heavyweight division. It's a little bit of a shallow division these last few years, so they've been bringing in a lot of new prospects. It's good to see the division back on the come up. But yeah, Shamil's put together some decent name value wins, but none too crazy. Man, this is a tough one. He had 2 fights last year, was able to KO Thomas Peterson, who's pretty decent, but then lost to Cortez. I feel like if he brings in the wrestling aspect, he could win this one for sure. But I don't know if his cardio will hold up. That's been one of his biggest problems, not having the best cardio. So I kind of do see Brando just coming out and piecing him up. I could see him getting the KO. Maybe Shamil's going to try to be, more countering and more on the back foot in this one. So maybe I'll lean Brando by decision. It's a big step up in competition for him. So, yeah, I'm going to lean Brando by decision. The next fight, Tim Elliott versus Steve Erceg. This is, a good matchup as well. Tim Elliott's the OG of this division. He's been around since the DJ days and still wreaking havoc on, up-and-comers trying to make their way up the ladder. And Steve Erceg is somebody, was tossed into that fire way too soon. And it's unfortunate. I wish the UFC would, take their time and really develop stars rather than trying to force things. But you do what you got to do. So with Erceg, he's coming off the win over Ode, which was not the most impressive performance. He was, on a bad streak right before that with the losses to Pantoja, Moreno, and Royval. Wasn't the best look, but those were all league guys for the most part. So you can't tip your hat too much. And this one, I'm not gonna lie, man. In the ground, Tim Elliott's sneaky. He got that sub on Asakura, which is pretty nasty. But Erceg knows his way around the grappling game. He has good wrestling. I think I gotta lean Usyk getting the dub here. You know, he's trying to build his confidence back up. I think he can still make another push at this division towards the top. I don't know if he'll get another title shot, but I think he's good for sure. He just needs to lock in on a few things and really get his fight IQ locked in. I feel like he tries to take the fight like where the other fighters are best at too much, and that's just not the best game plan when somebody's a specialist and you're trying to beat them at their own game. Can really show an evolution to your own game, but sometimes it's just not the smartest choice. So he needs to work on that, but I'll for sure lean Usyk on this one. And then the co-main, we got Dariush, old man Dariush versus Quillan Salakil, the real, veteran versus prospect matchup here. The UFC trying to push Quillan. He's getting a big backing. The fans are really behind him. He's an exciting fighter, 11-1. Got the rear naked choke over Malarkey over this year. Has been very active. The head kick over Nasperat was nasty. Got the decision win over Yanel. And then the right cross knockout over Anshul Jubilee really broke him onto the scene. So he's on a good streak. Took a loss in his pro debut, but after that he's been on a ravage streak, getting straight subs, TKOs, going crazy. So Quillan, he's for sure a prospect to watch out for, and rising up the lightweight rankings. And then on Dariush's side, he's the OG. He's underratedly, his skill set's a little underrated, in my opinion. He has good striking, good wrestling, good grappling. He can take the fight anywhere. A few years back, he was supposed to be the Islam Slayer because he could really bring the fight to Islam anywhere. And unfortunately, he's just ran into a few killers and maybe not made the best career choices. Just accepting these fights back to back to back, but you do what you got to do. He reached his peak beating Tony and then Mateus Gamrot the next year. Then he had that fight with Charles. Man, that was so crazy to watch live. I believe that was Charles bouncing back from the Islam loss, and he just gets slimed out by Charles, and he gets Armin. Right after that, Armin slimes him out. That was such a weird one too. Armin only had 1 foot on the ground and just threw this hook and it just sleeps, bro, or straight. And it was a good night. And then he got the win over Moicano. Almost got slept in that one too, but was able to bounce back. That's his best ability. If you don't put him away, he'll bounce back and make things ugly. And then shout out to my boy, the God of War, just slimed him out in 16 seconds. That was nasty. I remember that Madison Square Garden card. I got literally the whole main card straight up, all the predictions right, and the methods too, damn near. That card was nasty. But Benoit, shout out to bro for doing that. That was pretty crazy. I hear he's fighting Patty next. I'll be interested to look into that fight more deeper soon. But I think you gotta go Salakil here. I could see him getting upset. In the same way there's been a few lightweight contenders recently they've been trying to push. We had Rivovic with Gamrot. Gamrot showed his levels. He's so good for real, willing to fight anybody. And then we had the Chris Duncan and Moicano main event a few weeks back. And that one, I was thinking Duncan had enough to get it done. I thought Moicano was, looking a little old and stuff, but Moicano still got some in the tank. So the question is, can Dariush do the same? And man, with him, he's getting older. He's taking a lot of knockouts. He did beat Moicano, and Moicano showed levels to the youngin. So maybe that shows a little bit of maybe this might be a little too much for Quillan to handle. But he really has that pop. He has that KO ability. He has the same amount of KO wins as submissions, and damn near the same amount of decisions. So he can get it done any way he really needs to. I can, just and then Nasperat, Quillan, this is a big jump for him, honestly. I think that's something the fans, or, just us viewers tend to, overlook sometimes. Sometimes when the UFC are giving these big jumps to guys when they're not ready or don't have enough of experience, it's like they would have been better off getting that experience. But I'm actually lean Quillan in this one. His striking just seems super sharp. He has a well-rounded game. I think he'll get it done. And then the main event time, JDM, former champ, coming off the loss to Islam Makhachev versus Carlos the Nightmare Prates, coming off a complete sliming out of Leon Mumblemouth Edwards on that Madison Square Garden card, where there was just straight violence. So they're both coming off fighting on the same card. I believe Prates, he's pretty active. Surprised he didn't get another quick fight in right before this one, but makes sense. Once you get to that top level, it's one thing that, I don't know, in my opinion, fans, like on the come up, a lot of fighters, they're gonna fight a lot. They're trying to make their name, they're trying to get to the money, but once you reach that top level, it just doesn't make as much sense at all. These guys are so good that, like, why would you be fighting so active unless the UFC's throwing you layups? So, sometimes too many people complain about fighters' activities when it's like, 2 fights is good enough in a year to me. Maybe even 1. They're dealing with injuries, they're dealing with all this. I just want to see fighters at their peak performance be able to fight each other. No excuses. But, man, JDM, he's a technical boxer. He's shown that he's been working on his ground game a lot. Unfortunately, in the Islam matchup, Islam's just wrestling, grappling. He was just beating JDM to positions, which I feel like in the Bilal fight, Bilal did try to take him down. He showed good takedown defense. He got back up as well. He showed just a lot. I just feel like Bilal should have incorporated in his game plan leading up to the fight more specific things, if that makes sense, on how to get JDM down and really make it a chess match or checkers match, and be one step ahead of him the whole time. But it just felt like he just wanted to get into a dogfight with JDM, which isn't gonna be your best choice unless your name is Carlos Prates, because that's also what he's good at. And I feel like with JDM, he's a boxer, but he doesn't use enough movement. I think that's where Islam really got him. Those low kicks were eating him up, and he really has to set his feet and sit down on his punches and unload combos when you're right in front of him. I think that's something Bilal was too accepting of, is standing in front of him and being like, all right, let's see who's better in the pocket, which Bilal's a little underrated in the pocket, but JDM was just one step ahead of them that fight. As far as Prates, I feel like if JDM stops and tries to unload, that's where Prates is really good at picking his shots. If he backs him up against the cage, it can be bad for JDM. Has he ever been KO'd? So he's been TKO'd once in his life. Probably have to go all the way back to his debut for that to happen. He lost his first 2 fights, and then that's when he goes on his run that was ended by Islam. Guys, I gotta lean Prates in this one for sure. For the last few weeks, I had been thinking on it, and I think Prates just has the more overall experience against, he's done Muay Thai, he's done boxing, in that realm just of striking. He's so nasty. The power he brings at 170, his frame too, just with the long legs, he's really able to sit down on his punches and explode and, really bring that power that a lot of these guys haven't tasted. Slept Leon Edwards nasty. He hadn't really been slept before, and then got the spinning elbow KO over Neo. That was nasty. Buzzer beater. I think I gotta lean Prates in this one. Maybe JDM can try to mix in some wrestling to keep him guessing, but I just don't think that 1 training camp is gonna be enough for him to have advanced his wrestling game enough to where he's really threatening Prates, and Prates can feign knees and uppercuts. Oh, man, honestly, I think I'm confident enough to put a decent parlay on Prates. I just don't really see a way that JDM gets it done. Like, he could move on the outside and just pick his shots and outbox him the whole time, but I don't know. I just haven't seen enough from him to to visualize JDM actually doing that for 5 rounds. And I just don't see him putting Prates away. I feel like Prates actually has a pretty decent chance. I've seen him take some big ones from Gary. Gary landed that uppercut on him, had him rocked a little bit, but he's taking some decent shots, and he always just marches forward, and he has a good poker face. So guys, I think I gotta lean Prates in this one. He just feels like he'll eventually corner JDM up against the cage and unload punches and finish him there. So that's gonna be my prediction. I'd probably go with JDM. He's a tough motherfucker, but I'd probably go with maybe around 3 or 4 KO from Prates. I think yeah, he'll get it done in round 3 or 4. But yeah, guys, this is gonna be the fight night. Jack Della versus Prates. Let me know any comments or any thoughts you have down below. Any discussions of anything I said about certain fight or something. You're like, man, hell nah, ain't no way that's happening, or nah, that's not how I remember. Let's just start up some discussion. That's mainly what I wanted to make this channel for. It's a place to talk about MMA with other people who love the sport. But yeah, guys, that's it for today. Tune back in soon, and hopefully we get to enjoy a good card Saturday. All right, peace.